Hey guys, it's Matt. This video is going to be a little different from my latest ones. It's not going to be a review video, not going to be a news breaking video. This is going to be a video that's going to ask the question, why do I like pro wrestling? Now, had you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have given you an answer on the spot, and I probably would have provided you the laundry list of reasons why I liked it. Even if you asked me 5 years ago why I liked pro wrestling, I'd still give you reasons, though those reasons would need to be backed up and they wouldn't be as believable, because 5 years ago my heart wasn't in it as much. But now, in 2010, if you ask me why I like pro wrestling, I couldn't give you an answer. I could give you excuses, and I could give you answers that, that I'd try to stand by that I would have given you 10 years ago, but if you would ask me now, I really don't know. And so, I'd like all you wrestling fans to ask yourself the very same question. Do you still have the answers? Do you still find wrestling to be as enjoyable as you did 10 years ago? I know I sure as hell didn't. So, if you would, leave a comment or even make a video response giving me all the reasons why I should still be a wrestling fan. Be a wrestling fan. Well, before I try to go and answer my own question, let me give you guys a bit of backstory of where my wrestling fandom came from. When I was younger, the earliest memories I have of pro wrestling was about probably 95, 96. That's when the only wrestlers I heard about were Hulk Hogan, Doink the Clown, and The Undertaker. Now, I know there were a lot more wrestlers at the time, but those were the only ones that stuck out to me. I mean, with their different personas, you can understand why. And so, my brother and I, all full of energy at the time, we decided to take the cushions of the couch and have a makeshift ring. And it was real fun. We used to do that all the time. And then, for some reason, I just drifted out of it, didn't pay attention. I was younger. I didn't know it came on every week or whatever, so I stopped watching. The next time I would hear of wrestling was when, a couple years later, when I heard classmates talking about guys like Sting, or Bret Hart, or Hulk Hogan, or the NWO. I didn't know who they were. I thought they were made-up characters, or characters from a TV show, or movies. I didn't know. And so, somebody told me, the times that they would come on and the days, and so I started watching. And I think it was the characters and the personalities that were different from movies that intrigued me to it. That's when I started watching WCW. That's when I first met, Sting, Hogan, Lex Luger, Macho Man, Nash, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Buff Bagwell, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and even the announcers, Mike Tenay, Tony Schiavone, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and then Larry Zbyszko. And I liked WCW. I'd watch Monday Night Nitro every Monday, and I loved how it was on for 3 hours. That was my 3 hours of heaven. And I'd have, my grandmother record, every time it came on, I'd have her tape it, because I'd had to go to bed a lot earlier back then. And so, that was that. WCW was my wrestling. And even to this day, I still prefer WCW over all the other wrestling organizations. Not the later WCW, but WCW in general is my favorite. And then a couple years later, I started hearing classmates talk about, WWF, Stone Cold, Undertaker. I didn't know who these guys were. I thought, well, it's not WCW, so I, didn't pay attention to it. And, people started asking me, did you see what happened on Raw? Did you hear what happened? Did you see this guy? Did you see that guy? And I was oblivious to it. And so somebody introduced me to it. Started talking about some of the characters, and I was interested. And then they told me, the days and times that would come on, and I figured, okay, it's on a Monday, the same day as WCW, so I'll give it a chance and I'll watch it. And so every once in a while, when WCW was on, I'd flick to WWF, WWE now. And that's when I first saw The Rock, Stone Cold, Mankind, D-Generation X, The Undertaker, Sable, and that's when I first saw a ring to look, the way it did, and I'd see these personas and these characters, and it was like this carefree, serious, sex, drugs, and rock and roll type of thing, compared to, the Southern WCW, and I liked it. I remember one of the first matches I saw was Ken Shamrock versus Vader, and then after he beat Vader, he called out Stone Cold, and I hadn't seen Stone Cold wrestle before this, so I was like, oh wow, Stone Cold, is he like the top guy? And turns out he was. And I liked the persona, I liked how darker and meaner and carefree and everything that it was compared to WCW. And so I would start watching both programs. I'd watch WCW more, and then I'd watch the WWF, when I could. And then 2000 came along. That's when I kind of drifted out of WCW. Jeff Jarrett had come in, Wolfpack was gone. It was now the red and white NWO, the Millionaires Club. I didn't care for WCW then. I didn't watch it anymore. And then I started watching WWF. The first time I really sat down and watched, a whole year's worth was in 2000 when I started with the Royal Rumble. And then No Way Out. And then WrestleMania 2000, And then 2001 came along. WCW went out of business. I didn't care so much at the time. All I was worried about was Sting, because he was my favorite guy from WCW. And so from 2000 all the way to probably 2004, I loved WWE. I loved it. I still think those are the best years in the company. And and then 2005, I started hearing about TNA, and I didn't know what that was, so I started watching. I saw Jeff Jarrett, Sting, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, the America's Most Wanted, the Naturals, the X Division, all these things I didn't know of. And so I started watching TNA, and I started noticing some guys that were in WCW. So I used to think that TNA was like an offshoot of WCW, that because WCW went out of business, that's where all the the guys went. And so I watched TNA, and so yeah, I've been a wrestling fan technically since '98. So we're now to 2010. And you guys know what the wrestling products are like now. They're jokes. And so, over this past couple weeks, I've been thinking, if I quit watching wrestling, would I be okay? Could I stop watching wrestling? Could I abandon something that I've been, loyal to for the past 10 years? And I've been unsure, I don't know. There's a list of questions that I actually made up asking, different aspects of wrestling, of, what piques my interest still, what keeps me into it. And the list isn't very good. It's, I looked at the list and, there's nothing besides maybe the wrestlers that I saw when I first started watching are really the only guys keeping me around still. The same thing with UFC. Now that you got guys like Couture and Liddell and Tito and Rich Franklin and, Andre Arlovsky, Tim Sylvia, guys that when I started watching UFC, they're either gone or they're on their way out. And so I started asking myself, alright, Matt, break down the different parts of wrestling, and go from there.